YouTube Live. For those over on YouTube, how many people over there on the YouTube Live? And I'm live, yes. Okay. All right. Let's get down to the articles of the day. Anyone in the YouTube chat there, feel free to say hi. Feel free to say hi. Let me know you're there with me. All right. So the news we're talking about today, the interesting stories of the day. Now, I think there are some stories being mixed up here when I look at the different articles coming out, because there are two different instances of guns going missing from police stations. Well, not police stations, from police themselves. From two different cases of police ammunition, police arms and ammunition taking up itself and finding new owners of their own. So one case was back, I believe it was Christmas Eve, when one particular officer went to what they were calling online a zest. Whatever a zest is, it's in the Trinidad Urban Dictionary, I guess. Now, he was there in a zest. They say he may have been slightly intoxicated because he put down his firearm and forgot it there for 10 hours. And then when he recognized belatedly, of course, the firearm was missing by then. But that's one of the stories. There's actually another one now where a whole rifle was taken out of a police station. Someone would have to explain some of these to me. 11 cops detained over missing rifle. 11 Northeastern Division Task Force officers were detained yesterday after a Trinidad and Tobago Police Service issued Galil rifle went missing over the Christmas period. 1 sergeant, 1 corporal, and 8 constables attached to the San Juan substation were detained at their homes by the Professional Standards Bureau of the Police Service. Acting Police Commissioner McDonald Jacob confirmed yesterday. On Christmas Eve, an officer is said to have gone to a location in El Socorro where he placed the weapon with 2 magazines and left. Upon returning sometime later, the weapon and ammunition were missing. Last week, Wednesday, officers attached to the Northeastern Division Task Force officers searched a supermarket in El Socorro for the unaccounted weapon. The Galil rifle was not found, but several persons were questioned. CCTV footage from the businesses in the area seized. Now, honestly, I am not sure this is the zest rifle. I think this is another rifle beside the zest rifle. Good day, Mr. J. Chris. I'm glad to see you in the chat. Apologies again for my usual timing. Yes, it's not the same Zessa rifle. The Zessa rifle seems to be another incident. This incident is from some of the accounts I saw on the news. It seems like the rifle was taken from a police station, because in the Newsday article, they have it as senior police have confirmed that 11 officers have been detained in relation to reports that an automatic weapon was stolen from a police station in December. From a police station in December. So the Express says that someone put it down somewhere. So they put down the rifle somewhere. They have me wondering if it's the Zessa rifle. But it doesn't seem so. The 11 officers were arrested in relation to this rifle that they said was stolen from a police station. According to the Newsday article, it was reported that officers of the San Juan substation could not account for the weapon on December 28th, which led to a probe by police from the Professional Standards Bureau, police said at Tuesday afternoon 11 officers were assisting with inquiries. Responding to Newsday's questions via WhatsApp, one police officer said the matter was ongoing. The matter is under investigation by the PSB, the Police Standards Bureau, and the TTPS will provide further information as soon as it is appropriate to do so. I looked at an interview tonight with the acting police commissioner. And, when he started off, I kind of appreciated his approach because his approach seemed like it was more calculated. He seemed like someone who thought a bit more before he got into the fray. But now I'm not liking it that much. I am souring a bit to our new acting commissioner. Good night, Mr. Unknown Boy. When asked about it, several questions were asked of him. One of the questions that were asked was to give some details of it. And he went through the same thing that this officer in this article said, that at this current moment, it is under investigation, and we aren't going to give out any further details because it's under investigation. We cannot prejudice the investigation. And okay, fair enough, fine, right? But there are some things I think that are obvious that can be given out, and they aren't going to affect or sway an investigation. Good night, so all the best for the new year. Same to you, Mr. Long Live Lovey, or Miss Long Live Lovey, if it so be. Lawyers for the poor, Springer. It could surely seem so. But the thing is, these police aren't exactly rich either. And according to him, the investigation is ongoing. But I think there are some obvious details that can be given out. So many places you look at investigations, and at the very start of the investigation, someone comes out and at least gives a general idea, a general outlook of what we are looking at in this case. Is it that this is an inside job from the police? Is it that is the angle we are pursuing now? Or is it that someone ran into a police station and picked up a gun? Listen, for you to run in a police station and grab a gun from the armory or from wherever, there are two general possibilities. Let's break this down into two possibilities. We're doing a dichotomous key here. So one possibility is it was a crime of opportunity. This person just walked into the police station and they just so happened to see a gun lying there, and they said they're going to grab this gun and run. Somehow, I think that is extremely unlikely. I just don't see that happening. Remember all those in the chat, just by the way. If you're on YouTube too, make sure you click that like button on YouTube. Those likes matter also. And if you're in the chat on TikTok, make sure we sign up those likes. We're still under 1,000. We should be over 1,000 by now. It gets the live out further there. All right. So the two options: a crime of opportunity. Would you really just run into a police station and grab a gun? I don't think so. And it's not a hand pistol he grabbed. It was not Glock, a little 9mm or something that was grabbed. It was a long Galil rifle with extra ammunition. So, no, I don't think this was a crime of opportunity. So the other thing is it was planned. And if you're planning a crime inside a police station, I think the first thing you'd want is a police on your side. I think, that makes sense. The first thing you'd want if you're planning a crime inside of a police station is you'd want at least one of those officers leaning in your direction and turning a blind eye to what you're going to do. Because you're not going to get away with such a thing. And the part of the strange thing in this is it obviously wasn't a snatch and run. If you snatch and run from a police station, can remember there was an instance where an imposter police officer was going on crime scene. That imposter police officer, there was a lady, I don't know if it's the lady imposter police officer that you're talking about, but there was a lady imposter police officer that was out there doing it, I think, for a couple of years. This woman was, not only was she an imposter police officer, she was a senior ranking imposter. She was going around impersonating a senior officer, going and signing off books inside of police. I think, honestly, she may have had some screws that could have done with a little extra tightening. But that's kind of crazy that someone could just go on like that inside of the police service. But this couldn't have been a snatch and run, because what you hear from the police isn't that they caught the person running out of the station. They noticed the gun missing after a time when it was supposed to be signed in. The gun was noticed missing. So someone was able to enter a police station, take up a Galil rifle with extra ammunition, walk out with it, and not be noticed. And the only thing I saw on news was a little snippet of camera footage with someone running with a bag somewhere, running across the street. Okay, you were able to take up a gun and run out. Well, I don't think they ran out the police station. They walked out the police station, and then you ran down the road with a rifle. What kind of Mickey Mouse police service are we dealing with? How are we to expect a police service could protect this country when the police station itself is so porous? That doesn't really add up to me. It just does not make sense. What is the topic we're talking about? Police and their missing rifles. They seem to be misplacing rifles. Good night over there, Mr. Learn Chinese and Spanish on YouTube. You know, I never actually checked out your videos, your content. I may look into that, learn some Spanish and Chinese. Can't even secure the station. Exactly. And there was a question asked to the acting commissioner of police tonight on the news. They asked him that, what do you, in the future, what would you do now, looking forward? What would you do to, make sure such a thing never happens again? Make sure such a thing never happens again. What can we do to do that? And his answer was basically, he didn't answer the question. His answer was basically that things are good the way they are. Late tonight, I was late too, so you're actually only semi-late. Things are good tonight. Things are going good. We're nice. Make sure to smash that like button. Once you jump in the chat, smash that like button. Get your fingers working. That's the finger workout for the night. Make sure those likes sky up. Each person could put in a few thousand likes on their own. We could have 5 people in the chat and 5,000 likes. Nobody else needs to know that. But on a real, the commissioner said that what if there's anything that can be done, what he could see is that it's so clear we have processes in place that work so well, because the processes worked so well that we were able to notice within short time when the gun was missing, so that we could launch an investigation. So here's his reasoning. Here's his logic in this. His logic is that the system works because we were able to notice the gun missing. So now we could launch an investigation to look for the missing gun. So it's not that we should develop a system so that a gun cannot be stolen from a police station. No. We don't need to do such a thing. What we have is such a great system, such a cracking system, that anytime the gun goes missing, we could all go and investigate why it goes missing. Isn't this some backward nonsense? Why would we put trust in a police service if this police service, from the leader of the police service, what he is saying is his mission, his view of protecting and serving is always in post. There's no cutting of the crime before it's done. It's always just in post. We don't prevent, we just investigate. That's I don't want to use insulting language because the man is of a senior office, but that does not make sense. As a police officer, as a police officer, if you're looking into crime, you should be looking into preventative methods. And so when someone asks the question, what are you doing to prevent such a thing from happening in the future? The answer is supposed to be something like, okay, well, now we're going to make sure that our camera system is working. We're going to make sure that the guards that are posted sentry would do XYZ. The guard that was posted sentry on that day is now under investigation. So we'd make sure such a thing can never happen before, and that, well, actually never happen again, my bad. And that's the answer to that question. If a gun goes missing, the answer cannot be that we have a great system in place, so we could always investigate after it happens. That's not the answer to that question. The answer is something can change to make sure it does not happen in the future. If a gun goes missing, something already went wrong. You cannot say the system is working, because that's not how the system is meant. Okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is how the system is meant to work. In that case, well, you do what you have to do. Well, we are a reactive country. Hey, tell people also smash the bell. What is proactive? Yes, smash the bell if you're over on YouTube. Smash that bell so you'd know when the live comes in. True that. Good. All right. So you could share the live. You could like the live. Once you're in it, make sure you're clicking that like button or clicking that share button so we could get it out there further. And also in the news, we're not going to go through that entire story, but I just found it kind of funny that after all of the bacchanal that ensued with the floating restaurant, that another boat went out in Carenage there and they got caught. Some 67 of them, some officers, some army officers, some sailors from the Coast Guard, I believe. What going on with the Pelican? Well, nearly everything from that Pelican case right now seems like it's headed for the courts. Nearly everything. And I think, I had this story up yesterday, but I didn't go through this story. I think what they are doing is actually a pretty clever job. Apparently, you are familiar with all the boat ride zesters, Mr. J. Chris. I think what they're doing is a kind of clever job because several things happened since then. The finance minister sought to wash his hands of it. He said that when the application for the license came forward to him, he said no, he rejected that license. But his statement doesn't fully add up because the license was attained. They got the license. So you could say that you didn't sign the license, you rejected it, but then how was the license signed? He had the license. So that's one part that is in Bacchanal. And then the next case is when the Customs and Excise Division saw what was happening, they revoked the license. And now his lawyer is warning the Customs Comptroller that you don't have the authority to revoke this license. It's the courts that have to revoke this license. So he is warning the police. He is warning the Comptroller of Customs. He has a warning letter, I believe, to the Finance Minister also. So what is happening here is everyone is washing their hands from it and attempting to run as far and as fast away from it as possible. But Mr. Youthman, who is the co-owner of the boat, seems like he is not going to take the blame all on his own. And one of the clever things I think he did, just popping on to say great stuff and keep it up, man. Thanks, expat.tt. That was actually one of my first follows on TikTok. Yeah. What I think he's doing, which is a kind of clever move if you're thinking about it on the political side, he hired a lawyer that is generally more familiar with the opposition. And his mother, in case you didn't know, is a government minister. Hi, Debbie Singh Ing. His mother is a government minister. It seems like some of this had some familiarity with other government ministers. That's how he got some of the things done a little more expedited. But the lawyer that he hired is a familiar lawyer with the opposition. So that lawyer has no love lost with the government. That lawyer is sending warning letter after warning letter. He isn't sugarcoating anything. And that I find very, yes, that precise name, J. Chris, and that I find very interesting. It's actually a kind of strategic move. So while you may have seemed familiar with this side and friendly with this side, when they seem like they're trying to throw you under the bus now, because all of those politicians will willingly allow the businessman to take the fall while they wash their hands of it, you hire a lawyer who would go after them very seriously. So now you have some nice friction going on, and possibly after all the dust is cleared, because you know how cases end up in the court. If all of these things go through the court, by the time they reach to the conclusion, very likely most of us wouldn't even have interest in them anymore. This is already what, the 5th time I'm speaking about this story. By the time I speak about this 10 more times, no one is really going to be interested in it. So by the time this snakes its way through the courts and they deal with the case against the police, the case against the finance minister, the case against the comptroller at customs, and all of those things take their time, no one cares anymore. And the case washes away. ERL gift sending. Thank you very much. I feel very appreciated for all the gifts. I have no idea what those gifts really do, but thank you nonetheless. Okay, the more substantial thing, however, is something I've been seeing in some of the chats. I've seen this complaint in some of the chats already, and now I'm seeing an actual story coming out about it. And we're seeing it multiple places on social media. There are complaints about the treatment people are seeing in the hospitals. COVID patient treatments. Complaints from COVID patients' families. RHAs urged to act. Regional health authorities across the country have been notified of the need for communication with COVID-19 patients and their loved ones, as public complaints of a struggle to access information or retrieve the bodies of those who passed away within the parallel healthcare system increase. Health Minister said yesterday he has taken note of issues surrounding the treatment and management of the COVID-19 treatment system, adding, "I have sent to the CEOs over the weekend to address. Some whose relatives have passed away or are being treated for the virus in the parallel system set up to deal with COVID-19 have been complaining via traditional and social media that they are not being told where their loved ones are being kept." People have claimed they have received little or no communication from medical officials after their loved ones were diagnosed as COVID-19 positive and sent to a treatment center. Some have further claimed that the only communication they had received following a person's admission, sometimes days or a week later, was that the patient had passed away. This then presented further trauma, people have claimed, as they are then made to wait long periods before being able to retrieve their loved ones' bodies and belongings. Now, that entire thing sounds like a horror story to me. To me, that sounds like a horror story. You go in with your sick relative. You're already worried about this entire thing. And they are understaffed. Yeah, that may be a problem indeed. You go in with your sick relative and you drop them in there. The only thing you know is you put them there, they're not doing too well. You're trying to find out where they are, what's going on, what's an update on their condition. You radio silence. A week passes. And then the only correspondence you get is that they died. And then after that happens, you still cannot get them. You still cannot see them. You still don't have access to their belongings. That is a nightmare. That is a nightmare. And it's not the fault of the staff necessarily. It's not the fault of the staff. I don't think that in our healthcare system, the majority of staff are inside there thinking of ways we could dastardly make life more traumatic for all the regular citizens in the country. I don't think so. I don't think that our healthcare staff have this nefarious plot. I don't think that at all. But if the case is that it's understaffed, and now we are being overloaded, but yet on the face of it, we are being told something else, and the image that is being portrayed is something else. There's dishonesty there. I remember one of the lives I did last year was on the fact that several of the nurses have voiced that they're now thinking about leaving. But the health minister boasted that we have actually had an increase in nursing staff over the past year. So we were supposed to be seeing such an increase, aren't we? What is the problem? And this is part of the thing. When we have politicians managing things, that's part of the difficulty with the whole idea of a political class being your managers, with the whole idea of political classes managing your everyday life. I have an auntie who works there. The truth is the staff is overworked and seriously unpaid. They have a policy, no videotaping in the ward. I've heard that also. If you have a case where you have politicians managing something, remember, politicians, probably the number one concern of a politician, the number one priority of a politician is being re-elected. And the second priority of a politician is also being re-elected. So it's in a politician's best interest to make everything look as good as possible. So very often, because of that, we don't get honest news about the way things are actually going. Nurses don't deal with them things, administration, and they're not getting more of those. They are seriously understaffed. I waited 10 hours to get an ambulance from Arima Hospital to Mount Hope. It's the COVID regulations designed by the authorities under emergency health ordinance. And it's just a truth that when you have orders coming from a political class, they aren't there making sure things happen. They are giving orders from a podium. They just say something. And for it to actually reach down to the ground level, there needs to be actual staff to do that. There needs to be technical staff to get it done. And if that isn't in place, then what they're saying is irrelevant to the entire thing. But here's part of my problem with the entire thing, as I was saying. There needs to be honesty in it. You see, if this was a private institute, can you imagine if you went to a private hospital, you paid your money to go get a service, and then when you paid your money, they came back to tell you that, well, actually, you're going to have to, although you paid for the bed already, now that you paid and you're admitted to the hospital, we're going to put you out in a tent in the back. That's not how it would work in private. They would have to be upfront with that. Okay, this is what is going to happen. If you're spending your resources, this is what needs to be happen. But isn't it the CMO advising the politicians? The CMO is advising the politicians, but it's not the CMO that is making the policy. The CMO is an advisor. He doesn't make the policy. It's the politicians who institute the policy. So if anyone is to blame in the case here, in the scenario here, it would be the politicians for the policy. Now, there's just a realistic part of it. There's the side of reality where if too many people are sick and we don't have enough staff to see about that many sick people, it's just a case of impossibility. You just have too many sick people for not enough staff, a strained system. And that could be a reality. But if that is the reality, then there needs to be honesty on that front also. At yesterday's virtual news conference, Diyal Singh said he has asked CEOs to adjust everything from communication with patients to this very same issue. The minister said another trend was affecting this issue, where unauthorized persons were seeking confidential patient information. He went on to say what we are noticing across the system is that some persons who are trying to get information on other patients or the deceased are in fact not entitled to that information. Now, I'm sure there has been the occurrence of that before. I'm sure there's some fast person out there. There may be some journalist out there that has been trying to snoop around and get some early information on some deaths or something. I don't doubt that, but I don't think that is a significant problem. I don't think a significant issue that is backlogging our system is that people are trying to find out information on random deceased people from COVID. I don't think that's true. What about the treatment available that is being ignored? Now, that's another issue that I don't think I'd be able to get into, especially on YouTube. They may block me for certain things on that very same topic. I've heard very interestingly, I was looking at a post online where someone was speaking about the comparison in treatment between, where was it, West Shore Medical, one of those private medical centers and the public centers. And one of those private medical centers actually do have a COVID treatment facility. And there has been some information that seems to suggest that they have been having considerably better results than in the public. The Cuban vaccine, great. Also, as I say nightly, I'm fed up of COVID. Why don't we hear about the other arms of the hospital that not functioning because of COVID? That's a very good point. That's a very good point. And we won't hear about it because there aren't people to talk about it. If no one speaks about it, if no one knows, no one will know to see anything about it. So I'm just not sure how that would work in that case. But as I said, there's a real problem where there's just the impossibility of if there are too many cases for too little staff. And if that is the case, I do think that there needs to be more honesty with all of it. There needs to be honesty. All right. You all know how many in the chat keeping up with the news and saw that things getting so bad, even carib raising their prices now. So bears are also going to be increasing in prices. For those of you who may be worried about that. Interestingly enough, I doubt many people are anyone who was going to buy a stag or a carib before it raised by $1, they're still going to buy the same thing. They're still going to buy that $1 extra. That's strange enough about bears and vices like that. They increase prices and fluctuate in prices greatly, and people are still going to buy it. All the tears they're talking about now, they're still going to be buying those bears. It's not a problem for many people. And which order to see this in? In keeping with some of the COVID news, some of the viral news, NATAC reiterated their position. Maybe the problem is hospitalization, because what is the point if they are not getting treatment? Yes, not England, Trinidad, people different, yes. Yeah. NATAC reiterated their position. Now, I like to go back to this because, honestly, I find some of what NATAC says, the phrasing of how NATAC says what they're saying, seems a lot more reasonable. Oh, Springer, your neighbor here, Black Syrian. I don't know which one of my neighbors that is, but thank you for being here, names, Black Syrian. Cyrus, hey, welcome, brother. Yeah, I appreciate how NATAC phrases a lot of what they say. A lot of what they say seems to be a little more on a more logical feel than some of the other unions. So let's go into what NATAC reiterated about their positions. Now, if you were familiar with NATAC, NATAC was the union that came out questioning certain things about how we measure our death rate in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, they were the ones willing to ask the difficult question. And some people don't like that question being asked because it seems like you're trying to undermine some of the measures taking place. But I think NATAC has proper reason to ask that question. NATAC reiterates position on COVID deaths, demands ministry clarify the issue. The National Trade Union Centre has restated its demand that the Ministry of Health clarifies the reporting of COVID-19 death statistics. In a release by the NATAC General Secretary Michael Anisette, the trade union body maintained its position. This is the full statement coming from NATAC. Thank you, the Wildlife Master. Appreciated. The National Trade Union Centre, having not seen a response from anyone with respect to the statements made by the Chief Medical Officer at the media briefing on the 29th of the 12th, 2021, is forced yet once again to pick up the fight on behalf of the working class of Trinidad and Tobago and demand that the Chief Medical Officer comes clean and give the general public the valid and straightforward statistics concerning COVID-19 and COVID-19 related deaths in Trinidad and Tobago. If any one of you, like J. Chris would surely be, are familiar with many of the lives that I've done and are following the news as we go about them day by day, I spoke about this already. The CMO came out and he first answered this question and answered how they are checking these deaths. They answered how the deaths were being checked. And it revealed that they were actually coalescing quite a lot of information that wasn't exactly directly COVID-19 related deaths. NATAC, this is probably one of my favorite lines from NATAC's press release. NATAC want to make it clear that we are not doctors, nor do we have doctors in NATAC, but we have common sense, which was made before books, and we have spiritual guidance. Okay, NATAC, and I appreciate that nonetheless. She told us, well, most of the deaths in the Cuba hospital are preventable. They wait until they are badly sick to then come. Yeah. I appreciate, and I kind of agree with what NATAC is saying there. Some of the people who during this pandemic and during many of the crises, one of the first things they like to mention is, are you an expert on this? What are your qualifications about this? And I don't like that. If you're trying to convince someone to do something, it isn't a matter of their expertise and their qualifications on it. Because everyone cannot be qualified on everything before they make a decision. If you have to run an electrical system in your house, you are the one who makes the decision on where you might want some plugs, etc. The electrician can tell you, well, according to the stipulations, according to the code, well, we can't put a plug there, we can't put a plug there. But he cannot come in your house and tell you how many plugs you have to put in the entire house and where all of these plugs are going to be. You have some say in that matter. It's not all up to the expert when you're talking about things pertaining to your life and your person. So I don't appreciate this idea that who as it will, what is your qualifications to mention anything about this? Everyone has a right to raise questions about things that pertain to them. Fine. The CMO has tacitly admitted that the Ministry of Health has faltered in setting a case definition for a COVID-19 fatality. As it stands, persons counted as COVID deaths include 1. Any patient who is admitted to hospital and succumbs to a non-COVID pathology, example, heart attack, stroke, cancer, kidney or liver failure and surgical emergencies, and who incidentally tests positive for COVID at or shortly after the time of death, that person is counted as a COVID death. The second person is any deceased person in the community that incidentally tests positive for COVID, even if their medical history is not consistent of COVID. And then thirdly, any COVID-free patient who is admitted to a hospital for another condition and eventually develops COVID on the ward and subsequently dies from either a COVID or non-COVID related complication. So, in other words, it's a very, finally I made it to the live. I'm glad you're here, Dr. K. Forge. It's a very broad scope they're using. They're counting people who die with COVID. They're counting people who die from anything and they just happen to come in the hospital. And after they're deceased, you do a swab on them and they happen to test positive for COVID, then that's a COVID death. It doesn't matter. They're counting all. And that obviously gives an increased number. That gives a bloated number. Continuing with NATUC's letter. COVID-19 has a greater than 95% survival rate. As such, many, if not most of the patients who die from other conditions and who incidentally test positive for COVID-19 should not be incorporated into the COVID-19 statistic under the assumption that they would have died from COVID. Here's something I've seen someone say, and there's difficulty in saying some of these things and in getting some of these honest questions. Elite live tonight. I duck work since 9 for this live. I'm sorry, Mr. Joel Chow. It's a bit difficult because many times when you're speaking about this, it's a sensitive issue. Many people would be raw with the fact that some of their family, some of their friends have died with this. And if it seems like you are questioning the reality of their death, if you're questioning whether there was something there that killed them, it gets really sensitive. And some people don't take those things well. And that's understandable. But when you're talking about policy decisions for the entire country, you have to understand that some of these questions, some of these realities have no real offense to someone meant. It's just trying to get to the truth of a matter. So here's the reality. I've heard someone put it this way. The only statistic that matters now to them is anyone who dies from COVID who would not have otherwise died in the same year. Part of the reason for that is the average age for death by COVID, I believe in the United States, was, I don't know where it's at currently. I'm speaking about from the last time I looked at it. The last time I looked at it, it was either late 70s or early 80s. The average age of death for COVID was the average life expectancy. So what that was basically saying is that most people who were dying from COVID were very likely people who may not have lived much longer. And in that case, if you're taking the test of everyone who dies, then the reality is you would have people who may have died anyway. And it's not that I'm relishing in that fact. I'm not denying the sadness of that death, but you're taking that person and counting them in something that makes it seem like their death was caused by something else. And it makes a dishonest reality. And I appreciate NATUC for asking this. NATUC wishes to re-emphasize that the Ministry of Health should provide an explicit and standardized definition for a COVID-19 related cause of death. For example, COVID-19 pneumonia, sepsis, or multiple organ failure. The primary cause of death recorded on the death certificate should corroborate with irrelevant medical history from a family member. For example, a deceased person who experienced symptoms associated with a heart attack and whose history is consistent with chest pains should not be classified as COVID-19 if their cadaver tests positive for the virus. What they're saying there is if you know someone who has a history of heart disease, and then they die of a heart attack, and when you test them, they test positive for COVID-19, then it seems what NATUC is saying, let me not say what I'm saying. What NATUC is saying is that in such a case, it seems like a stretch to put down that death as a COVID-19 death. A positive PCR test at the time of death does not does not satisfactorily classify as a COVID-19 fatality because, given the rate of transmission in the community, many persons are expected to be incidentally positive for COVID-19, even though COVID-19 did not cause their death. Now, Here's a bit that I would add to that. There's an article out in The Guardian also. Why are so many vaccinated people getting COVID-19 lately? And they went on to explain that part of the reason for that is because Omicron is in the environment now. Omicron is in the community now. So many people have the virus. And this increases Natuk's point even more. If many people do have this virus, then you can't just count it as anyone who is testing positive and died is a related death. Furthermore, the Ministry of Health should publish the non-COVID fatalities alongside the daily COVID deaths, so the public can determine if the baseline deaths that were occurring prior to COVID are now subsumed into the COVID-19 statistic. Prior to COVID, 34 persons died every day in Trinidad. What is the present daily death rate in Trinidad? That's a good point. And that's what many people are bringing up. Good night, Mr. Lee Foreverboard. That's a point people are bringing up in various countries. One of the comparisons people want to make is the comparison between the general average death rate of a country and comparing that now with the COVID-19 death rate to see if there's a difference. And many people, thank you, Mr. Lee Foreverboard. Many people could be kind of, yes, USA made another record, but that's not an important record. The infections aren't an important record. Look at their death rate. That's an important record. And I think that is still going down. Many people were making the point. That they're worried that what is happening now is all deaths in the country is being classified nearly as COVID-19 deaths. And okay, that may not be the case. That may just be some people being extra worried and distrustful. But then in that case, my solution to this that I've kept saying from the very beginning, Trump had it right. Many people are saying that and are sad to say that. From the very beginning, what I've been saying is just be honest with the data. Okay, that may not be so. COVID may really be killing a large and increased number of people. And I don't doubt that may very well be a possibility. Fine. Well, release the data. This is the part that really confuses me. If you're seeing people worried about these things, and the data is there, the data are not any difficult things to come about. All this data that is required to do this has already been collected. Just release the data. Allow people to see it. Allow them to be rested in themselves over what is happening and build back some trust, because people have lost trust in some of these institutions, and rightfully so. Medical segregation demands incontrovertible empirical data. This is again what Natuk is saying. They won't release it because then people won't take the vaccine. We would see. They want to have people under fear. The government safe zone policy, which began on the 11th of the 10th, is built on the notion that vaccinated persons are unlikely to contract or transmit COVID, whilst unvaccinated persons are a disproportionate threat to others. However, indisputable empiric data should be provided if the government wishes to proceed with a program of medical segregation that systematically excludes unvaccinated persons from public spaces, employment opportunities, government offices, and from public dining or entertainment venues. And I fully agree, because some people are going a bit extra and are likening it like into days from World War II and like Nazi Germany, etc., etc. And I may not say that it's that far, but this is a serious issue. If you are saying that this class of people who do not get this medical treatment are going to be separated from society, I think you shouldn't do that just based upon a little snippet of data. You say that more unvaccinated people are in hospitals. I don't think that should be done. I think if you want to do that, there should be, as Natuk rightfully phrases it, incontrovertible empirical data. Show people that this thing is clear. Answer as many questions to them as you can. Remember, some people keep forgetting what a government is. The government we have isn't a government like back in colonial days. We don't have a monarchy. We are not subjects under a king, under a ruler, under an emperor. No, we are supposed to be free people choosing leaders to lead our country and administrate certain parts of our country and manage certain aspects of our country that will be better managed with a more collective mindset. That's the setup we're supposed to have. And in such a case, the politicians aren't supposed to come like kings and say, well, what is going to happen is this. No, you are supposed to come and explain all the intricacies of the data and tell people every bit they want to know. It's like if you hire an insurance policy. If you hire an insurance policy and you have an insurance agent and you're going to pay for whatever insurance setup you want to get. And when you ask a question, the insurance agent says, well, you're not an insurance expert, so who are you to ask that question? Mind your business. Or have you studied actuarial science? Do you know the technical details of... I have a question for you. Ask your question. Do you still listen to the morning COVID-19 update of the ministry? No, I do not. At first, I used to listen to the entire thing. I do not listen to it anymore to answer the YouTube question over there. So can you imagine that? You went to your insurance agent and they're telling you, well, you're not an actuarial scientist, so don't ask me any questions about your insurance policy. Just give me the money and trust that I would give you the best insurance policy. Just trust me on this. No one would actually do that. You're going there and you're going to ask questions. And if you don't understand, you'd ask the question in an inverted way. And then ask the question again and again. And it's on the insurance agent's prerogative. It's their job, it's their portfolio to explain this good enough to you that you'd want to spend your money on it. The only monarch we have in Trinidad is Marshall, the Soca Pinnacle. Okay, we have Marshall fans in the house. Good for you. And that's what I think should be done. If someone asks for more data, then give them the more data. For goodness sakes, someone wants to know what was the base death rate. Well, tell them the base death rate. They want to know what's the comparison now that we have COVID. Show them, is it now that COVID has 50 people dying per day versus before it was only 34? But if the case is now that with the COVID deaths, we are seeing the death rate still bubbling around mid-30s, then the people have a point that what you are scaring everyone about isn't as scary as you're telling them it is. Knowledge is power. They don't want people to have the power of freedom to choose. As I keep saying, I like my conspiracies, but I like to listen to conspiracies and even read about them and wonder about them. But I don't think many of these conspiracies work in real life. But it really makes you wonder sometimes when you're seeing some things like this that to me seems like there's an obvious solution to help some of these things. There's an obvious solution and they won't just do it. Here's what I think. This is my theory. It's not a conspiracy. This is just my theory. I don't think it's a conspiracy by all the top heads in the world to rule these poor plebs and give them some strange medicine and force them to take it. No, I think it's the easy path. They've been told by the WHO that if you want to run your country right, the right thing to do now, the right thing for every ruler of every country to do now is get their vaccination. The vaccine is not here to kill us. I don't think it is. The right thing that they're hearing, this is being told to every single country basically by most of the top health organizations. If you want to run your country right, if you want to do things right, good night Wendy Medium XL, I was missing you in the chat. If you want to run your country right, the right thing to do is get as many people as possible vaccinated. And now, bear in mind, these country leaders do have pressure from outside too. They want to look good on an international stage. They don't want it to look like I'm the country where everyone is unvaccinated. They want it to look like my country is well disciplined. I could have run my country well and that's how my country ended up like this. I think that actually has more to do with it than the pressures of some nefarious people trying to underhandedly rule the world. Reason being is that if all of we dead who pay tax, they're just targeting the elder to pay less NIS. And going into the final stories I have for today, the union, some of the other unions, that was what NATOC and their general secretary said. This is where the other unions agreed and where they are pushing now. Basically, all the unions, I've heard that before. Not the vaccination itself, the vaccination cards and the vaccination information could lead to the social credit system. In many places, that is literally where it's going to. So, good for them. I would hope not. I have no interest in living in that kind of world. Defiant Roger tells unvaxxed workers, report for duty. Things are getting spicy. Things are starting to heat up on that front. And I think this is where we're going to see who has the more metal here. Who when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Is the force really unstoppable and is the object really immovable? We're going to find out because they're going to be meeting. President General of the Joint Trade Union Movement, JTUM Ansel Roger, is calling on vaccinated and unvaccinated workers to report for work as normal, even as policies are being worked on to make the public service and all government offices safe zones where only vaccinated workers will be allowed to work. Speaking on the steps of the Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs on Richmond Street, Roger and other union leaders reaffirmed their stance against mandatory vaccination for public servants. Later on Tuesday, the Public Service Association held a press conference where they also voiced opposition to the mandatory vaccinations. So PSA changed their president. Florida is free to choose to wear a mask or not, free to choose vaccination or not. Here's the funny thing with Florida. Here's the funny thing that I find insulting with this Florida business. So many politicians, because Florida is a political case now. Florida is the beacon of one side of American politics, and they're running the pandemic response how they think they should. And many on the opposite side are constantly insulting Florida and saying that they want to kill people. The Florida governor is Death Santis. He's looking to kill as many of the Floridans as possible. And okay, they're saying that. But the strange thing is, person after person after person from that side of the political divide, when they want a vacation during the pandemic, are repeatedly being found in Florida. So they're leaving their New York home where there are mask mandates and then going down to Florida, taking off their mask and jumping up and having a good time. And then going back to New York to look back on Florida and see what they're doing down there is evil. These people are sick. These people are sick. And in that case, that's one of the things I'm really grateful for in my little island of Trinidad and Tobago, my twin island republic of Trinidad and Tobago, is that although our politicians are very upsetting on their own, I support the union. If we lose health autonomy, what else we will lose in the future? I'm vaxxed, by the way. So am I. One of the things I'm grateful for in my twin island republic is that as aggravating as some of our politicians are, we haven't seen nearly, not even remotely, the amount of hypocrisy that you're seeing in some of those other countries. In England, their prime minister banned indoor dining and indoor parties, and he had 5 or 6 parties while with other members of his cabinet while it was banned. That's insanity. In the US, that same case, they're insulting Florida. Florida is doing it the evil way. They're evil for what they're doing. They want to kill people. But every time they want a vacation, Mr. Don Lemon from CNN, who sits on the CNN news frequency and constantly lambasts Florida and how Florida is managing the pandemic. It's so horrible. It's so horrible. It's so horrible. And then when he wants the vacation, where does he go in his little beach shorts? He goes to Florida to sit on the beach, unmasked and unwind. It's insane. It's insane. That's like if we were in Trinidad. Imagine if we were in Trinidad and when they bust that boat ride, you saw Dr. Rowley and Miss Sharon Rowley on the boat ride liming. That's what that's like. And I'm grateful in my Twin Island Republic that we haven't seen that level of hypocrisy from our leaders. Vax or not, you can still get it and spread it. What's the problem? This separating work from personal life. That's a good way. That's a good way to see hypocrisy. Because when your work affects other people's personal life, so not everyone can leave New York and go to Florida on vacation. So if you have a vax mandate in New York and you're saying that it's necessary to save lives, then don't go to somewhere that doesn't have the vax mandate for you to relax and enjoy the time. Because it's not adding up. You're not adding up. You're not being honest in your stances. So that's not separating work and personal life to me. That's being a hypocrite. Plain and simple. Roger was flanked by the representatives of TUTA, that's the Teachers Union, the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Union, the Bankers Insurance and General Workers Union, the TT Postal Workers Union, the Registered Nurses Association, the Fire Officers Association, and the Steel Workers Union of Trinidad and Tobago. He accused the Attorney General of not holding enough consultations with trade unions before finalizing workplace policies. A memorandum from the Ministry of Public Administration on Monday reported that under the government's policy, the public sector would operate as a quasi-safe zone as of January 17th. Roger argued that companies refusing entry to unvaccinated employees would qualify as a breach of industrial relations, and he told unvaccinated workers to show up for work as normal. This is what he was saying. Let them deny you entry into your place of work, and that will be tantamount to illegal lockout. The trade union movement and our legal team are waiting to deal with those issues. Do not set up yourselves by staying at home. Present yourselves to work. You are engaged currently under certain terms and conditions of employment, and therefore that has not been renegotiated by your union, and therefore you should go to work on the 17th of January and continue. Let the government lock you out from your place of employment, Roger said. That's a very interesting stance. And here's the thing. I am not sure if he's in the legal wrong there. He may very well be in the legal right. Unless they very well word whatever they're looking to pass, if you just lock out your employees who have not breached the terms and conditions of their contract, you may very well be treading on very thin legal ice. And then, here's the next thing. I am wondering if that was part of the strategy, and the union here is trying to make sure their members are wise about this strategy. Do not get chained up and listen to the furlough talk and let them make you stay home from work. You see, if you act furloughed, then they can actually treat you as if you're furloughed. If you're not vaccinated and then you decide, well, I'm not vaccinated, so I not go and go to work, I don't think Rowley said don't come to work. He said you ain't getting pay. And that still won't work. If somebody ends up on the job site and you don't pay them, either way, I think that would end up in courts. No employer can change the terms and conditions of employment without consultation with the union. That is true legally. But what the Attorney General has promised, what he has said his intention is to somehow do this legally, changing the legal framework so it's not about discussion on employers' rights. It's not about a collective bargaining issue. It's about the laws of the land. So it's interesting. I wonder if vax cards will be more important than... Nearly got me reading that there. Referring to memos that were issued by other places, he said they are runaway horses where a vaccine mandate was being introduced despite calls for dialogue. He said any legislation requiring employees to provide proof of vaccination would interfere with other laws, including the Industrial Relations Act, the Retrenchment, Severance and Benefits Act, the Data Protection Act, and the OSH Act. all of which guarantee certain provisions to a worker. And that's the next thing. Even if Mr. Faris Al-Rawi creates a piece of legislation that says that you're supposed to be vaccinated to get into the job, here's the thing. There could actually be illegal laws written. Hi, enjoy your content. Thank you, Miss Kilo Martinez. Appreciate it. There are certain bits of legislation that could be illegal. For example, part of the bacchanal that ensued last year with the police commissioner was because there was a bit of legislation that was drawn up that wasn't in line with our constitution. So even if he creates a bit of legislation, yes, there can be illegal laws, unconstitutional laws, I should phrase it as, a bit of law that doesn't line up with our constitution. So if you do a judicial review of that law, the law could be struck down because it doesn't line up with our constitution. Well, then if the government wants to change the law, then he making it a dictatorship. Wouldn't requiring vax be considered discrimination? To some extent, it might. He also asked workers not to give their vaccination status to their employers, as this could further empower management to take measures against them. Now, this, I think, is where the key is. I don't think the key is in telling people to vaccinate or not. They should encourage, if I were the union, I would encourage workers, speak to your medical professionals, speak to your doctors, speak to your personal doctors, and get some professional recommendations on whether you should be vaccinated or not. That's what you should be doing. But on the employment side, on the freedom side, don't give them your vaccination status, because here's the thing. Even if 90% of the public service is vaccinated, if none of them give you their vaccination status, how are you going to enforce this? Here are some of the problems I was wondering about in this case. If on the 17th of January, all these workers show up for work, and then the security officers in the public service buildings are part of the unvaccinated staff. So you're looking to get some of those unvaccinated security officers to lock themselves out of the building. Remember, we're suffering really bad in this public service. And then when you're trying to lock out some, imagine this scenario. You pull up on the 17th of January, you're trying to get the unvaccinated security officers to lock themselves out of the building. When they refuse to do that, the management then calls the police to try to get the police to lock them out. But the police say, well, we unvaccinated too, so we can't even enter your building. Remember, your building is a safe zone now. So we are not giving you our vaccination status, so we police can't enter your facilities either. You call the fire service to try and get something, and they say the same thing. Listen, this is setting up for some very interesting things. And I think negotiation needs to happen. As I kept saying, I said this from the very beginning. I heard people talking about the law and legality, and are they talking this? And you know, many people waiting for public service jobs, like if they're going to fire the entire public service and then hire a bunch of 20-year-olds to do it. That's not going to happen. The thing is, the power the unions have had, the unions still have, and the power the unions always have is the collective power of workers. The country ratified ILO conventions. How can you change something against that? Is a proven fact that unvaxxed workers are more of a threat than vaxxed. That's what NATOC was speaking about. NATOC was asking them to get clear proof of this. The government also forgets that if people are pressured, they might find illegal ways, fake vax cards. That's true. That's true. All right. General Secretary of NATO, Michael Anisette, criticized the Prime Minister and Attorney General for acting outside their remit by instructing public servants to take the vaccine. He described this as undemocratic. When a government can have a policy without engaging the unions, and by extension the workers affected by that policy, we know we are on a dictatorial train. There is no excuse. That is undemocratic, and that behavior has no place in a democracy. Strong words, but I really can't say he's wrong. I really cannot say he's wrong. I'm not vexed with the people, though. Too much force on the people. There were some articles I also have up here where there were some articles I have up here where some people were getting vaccinated. Some of the public servants were out there getting vaccinated, but there hasn't been a clear influx. The amount of public servants that have to get vaccinated to make this policy really be effective, I don't think we're seeing that kind of influx of public servants into the vaccination centers. It's just not happening, and I don't think it's going to happen before the 17th of January. Okay, that's all for the YouTube live. Let me see, are there any questions or comments in the YouTube live that I need to address first? Do you believe we will have another lockdown? I don't think Trinidad is in a position to handle another lockdown. We are not the same as those larger countries. We don't have the amount of resources they do to survive lockdowns the way they can. I don't think it's in our books. And I think the Prime Minister basically said that. We'd have to get really, 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 really drastic for another lockdown to happen. Okay, that's it for the YouTube. Goodbye to YouTube. Thank you for tuning in. See you